late morning, a couple of days after the Memorial Day holiday, and I'm in Morgan Hill, California. This is the South County part of Santa Clara County. This is the criminal courthouse where I have covered a lot of cases, but what happened here today was probably the worst thing that I've ever seen. So I'm following a case that overlaps with family and criminal court. And there have been a lot of shenanigans going on in the underlying family law case. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. That was a case that involved a couple who had been involved. They had been divorced for 10 years. And all of a sudden, the wife in the case decided she was going to stir up some custody issues. And so she went and got herself a lawyer, Christina Adams. And when she got that lawyer, they started bringing in all the lawyers, the custody evaluators. The father was accused of having an alcohol problem. So they started testing and all this stuff where they had a reunification therapist. So first they take the dad's custody away from him, and then they give him a reunification therapist to the attorneys suggested. And the reunification therapist was Marcia Clark, and I have written some articles about her. So reunification therapy is a scam that works like this. They rip your child away from you, your custody away from you in family court. And the lawyers get involved and they do that. And then they tell you that you need a therapist to put your family back together. And so this dad starts going through all this alcohol testing, and hang on, there's a train coming. There is the Amtrak train going through here. So back to what the reunification therapist does. The attorneys get involved in the case. The couple is not working out their problems in their co-parenting. And now she has an attorney, Christina Adams. He has an attorney, Walter Hammond. And they say, oh, you need a reunification therapist at $300 an hour. So they take the kid away. They call CPS, all because the mother has this issue with something that happened in a sushi restaurant in downtown Willow Glen. CPS says, nope, nothing wrong. But the family court is able to keep profiting off this. So now the attorneys get the reunification therapist in, and she's supposed to connect the dad back with the kids that the family court process took from him in the first place. He had 70% custody, and then he moved to 50% custody, and somehow the mom decided to hire an attorney and try to get full custody. And this little game of push and pull with kids is really, really problematic. So Marcia Clark's the reunification therapist in this case. And the next thing we know, along comes the court saying, oh, the children need an attorney. So you've heard me talk about this before. 90% of people going through family court can't afford an attorney. They have to play attorney themselves. And so why are we giving children attorneys? It's happening all the time. The federal government, the state government, taxpayers pay for these attorneys if the parents can't afford it. And if the parents can't afford it, then they start billing the parents. And soon you will be paying for these people in a rate that is equal to going on a vacation, paying for a college account. That's what starts happening. So Marcia Clark gets into this case to reunify the kids with their dad, and that's 2019. And this goes on for hundreds of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees, alcohol testing, and all kinds of things. And then when that doesn't work, they appoint the minors counsel, and the minors counsel's name is BJ Fathom. And BJ Fathom is one of the in-crowd politically. He got referrals from that nonprofit Women SV that I've been reporting on. He was in leadership for the local bar association. He was in that secret bar bench media police committee that I had been reporting on, and he was also in Inns of Court. And that was what we talked about a couple weeks ago, where the judges were meeting with certain lawyers, and they were having their little club meeting to talk about court reporters and everything else. And taxpayers were paying part of that, but the public wasn't invited. So we're back in 2019 and 20, and this poor family, 10 years after their divorce, are fighting over custody issues, and the lawyers are just making gobs of money. Christina Adams in particular, who is a really dirty attorney here in Santa Clara County, who used to work for Nat Hales as a private judge, and she seems to be involved in a bunch of high conflict cases. If you watch Father in Exile, he's a dad who lost custody of his kids, and Christina Adams was involved in that case as well, and that is resulting in a federal case that the dad is bringing against these attorneys and what they're doing in our family court cases, and that's in Nevada. So when other states or federal judges see what's going on and they don't do anything about it, then it's even more of a problem. So we're going back to this poor couple. Dad's name is Jeff. Mom's name is Maria. Maria doesn't want Jeff to have custody of his kids. Now, I want to say that any parent, mother or father, that decides that their opposing spouse or the parent of their kids shouldn't have shared custody time is a problem. And if there is a reason, meaning somebody is abusive to children, then take it to the DA and get it criminally prosecuted. Don't handle it in court. Because all these fake domestic violence, and I'm fearful and I'm scared because somebody sent me an email, or because they called me, or because couples fight. And that doesn't mean that it belongs in court. So Maria decides to keep paying Christina Adams. This case drags out. They're paying $300 an hour to Marsha Clark. The children's attorney, BJ Fathom, is getting paid by taxpayers. And then 2 years into it, when the father has gone through all this alcohol testing to prove that he's not drinking, he's done all the parenting classes he's ordered to pay, again, all that money going to these programs that are probably not needed. But the dad is suffering from mental health issues from not seeing his children. He had been the primary force in their lives, and now all of a sudden he's not seeing his kids, and the attorneys are all involved, and now he switches out attorneys for Walter Hammond, and he hires Julia McDowell of the Hoover Kapalka law firm. Well, at the time, Julia McDowell was getting business and working with a nonprofit known as Women SV, which was known for discriminating against men who may have been victims of domestic violence. But more importantly, she was involved in basically rigging divorce cases and acting as a referral service. So this is a nonprofit. When I first started doing this, you guys were all telling me about nonprofits. I was like, how can a nonprofit be bad? Well, that's how it could be bad. The nonprofit literally was acting as a divorce referral service, and it was also trapping these women into this organization where the ones that were showing up who may have really suffered from criminal domestic violence were not getting help. They were only getting referrals to divorce attorneys. I'm going to read all your questions in a minute, but I'm going to keep talking about this because what happened in this courtroom today, I want you all to see what it looks like. So Jeff's been away from his kids for a couple years, paying $300 to this reunification therapist, Marsha Clark. The minors counsel is BJ Fathom, and he keeps coming up with reasons to not have his kids see Jeff, and it gets dragged out, continued over and over again. And eventually the dad runs out of money and can't pay Julia McDowell anymore, and he starts representing himself. And that's when BJ Fathom moves in. BJ Fathom moves in to all of this and comes into court, gets the dad to sign a conflict waiver without saying why for Judge Zucker to hear the case. He doesn't know why he's signing the conflict, but they tell him, if you agree to use this judge, you're going to get your kids back. So the first hearing before Judge Zucker, yep, you're going to get your kids back, Jeff. And they keep waiting and waiting, and then calls up BJ Fathom and says, when am I going to get to see my kids? He goes, oh, there's no court order. I'm not going to help you see your kids. So this is the attorney that the court appoints to represent the best interests of the kids. He says, I'm not going to let you see your kids. So this is a transgender, highly connected political attorney has decided that for a boy and a girl, it's in their best interest to not see the father, the grandmother, the aunt, and the family that had raised them and had primary custody of them. So this goes on and on. So then Jeff decides to file representing himself a request to see his children in court. He needs a judge to say you can see your children. So then Jeff goes into court thinking he's going to get his kids. He signed the conflict waiver BJ Fathom asked him to sign. He signed everything. Marcia Clark keeps not doing anything, but he has to pay her $300 an hour. So he's going broke. He's losing his business, and he's desperate to see his children. He's paid everything that he can. His mother has paid everything that she can. His sisters have paid what they could to keep all these lawyers and therapists fed 10 years after a divorce over a custody dispute. So that's what's happening. And then we come to August of 2021. And Jeff goes into court thinking he's going to see his kids again. And guess what happens? He literally walks into court, and instead of addressing the kids seeing their father, BJ Fathom stands up and says the man's daughter, Faith, wants to be a boy named Alex. And instead of ordering that he can see his child, who is 11 years old, the judge orders that the father has to start calling his daughter by the name Alex and using male pronouns. I have looked high and low, but I have never found anything in the law that would allow any judge to order a parent to call the child who is born a girl named Faith, Alex, by male pronouns. So it gets better. Poor Jeff. He's now told he can only see his daughter if he calls her by the name Alex and uses male pronouns. Nobody else is ordered to say that, only Jeff. So he does. He doesn't have a problem. He says, I love my kids. I just want to see my kids. And then all of a sudden, BJ Fathom starts dragging it out again. 2021 goes by, 2022 goes by. The dad still hasn't seen his kids that got taken in 2019 because the mother decided she didn't want him to have full custody. And then he loses it. He fights depression, he fights suicidal thoughts, he fights all of it. And he goes into the therapist's office with a gun that is not registered, in violation of the restraining order they got against him. And the Campbell police are called, and the therapist, Marcia Clark, says he held the gun to her head and threatened to kill her. The father says he went there simply asking her to call his son. He was out of money, he was staying in a Motel 6, he had lost his home, he was desperate, he had mental health issues, not because he had mental health issues before all of this, but because family court had pounded on him for so long, simply because the mom didn't want to share custody and the lawyers incited the conflict. So he goes in with the gun. They arrest him. He had threatened a therapist who the courts use on a regular basis. And then he gets arrested and he gets put in county jail. And there he sits for 2 years. And he is determined to tell his story about what happened in family court and how he ended up in jail on a no bail hold for 2 years. He waives time, he pulls time, he goes back and forth. His family raises money for a private criminal defense attorney. They run out of money. The public defender doesn't do anything. The prosecutor overcharges. They do not want this man to tell his story to a jury. They do not want a jury to hear what happened in that family court proceeding. They do not want a jury to hear that a transgender attorney appointed for a little girl and a little boy said that an 11-year-old girl wanted to be a boy and the judge made it an order. They don't want a jury to hear that. So they leave him in jail. And he's still determined. He talks on the jail calls to his sister. He tells her, I'm going to hold out. I'm going to go to trial because I want a jury to see this. I want a jury to hear what they're doing in family court. He had lost all that time with his kids, and he wanted a jury. 12 people, 12 reasonable people who are members of the community to hear what our family courts are doing. And then the prosecutor overcharges. Oh, everything is a threat. a little girl who was in the office was also threatened. And the prosecutor tells this great story because that's what prosecutors do. They incite passion and prejudice with a jury, and they certainly don't want a jury hearing anything about family court. And the public defender gets reassigned and another one comes along, but none of them ever investigate the underlying family court case or the credibility of the therapist who says that she was threatened with a gun. They don't do that. They don't do any work. They just keep him in jail for 2 years. So if his mental health wasn't a problem before, sitting in jail for 2 years on a no bail bonds is certainly a problem. And then all of a sudden, he tells his family over a jail call that he's going to trial. He's not going to take a plea. And the following day, the judges issue a case where there's going to be a hearing where he's going to say we're going to trial. I do a media request, it is denied, and they move him from San Jose down to this Morgan Hill courthouse. They bring him down here in the afternoon without a formal notice that the hearing was going to take place, and they put him in a little room in this courthouse, and they pressure him to take a plea, telling him he's going to do 30 years in jail. And so then he snaps, and he agrees to the plea. So the man who had 50-50 custody and a normal life and no criminal record and no history of mental health issues prior to a 10-year divorce case dragging out in a custody battle is suddenly taking a plea to 6 felony counts, even though he knew that there was evidence that would contradict the witness and make Marcia Clark look like a liar. And they did not want to make a court-appointed therapist be wrong. Our judges, our attorneys, our police officers are so set on not being wrong and not considering what the public sees that they stick to whatever they order and they do not change their mind. So he took a plea, and his sentencing was today. And there were a number of people that were going to come and speak about what the family court had done and all the interference and the improper conduct of the prosecutor and the public defender. And when a prosecutor engages in misconduct, it's called prosecutorial misconduct, and it is grounds for undoing a case. When a public defender engages in misconduct, it's called ineffective assistance of counsel, and it can undo a case as well. But when you take a plea with all that happening in the background, that plea is not going to get overturned. It's like a settlement. If you are involved in a divorce and you settle a case or agree to something, stipulate to something, then you have very little chance of ever undoing that order, even if you were defrauded or misled in making that agreement. So remember that when you waive your rights to due process, that's what happens. But even when you don't waive your right to due process, they move the court cases around so the public and the victims and everybody affected by the case can't see what's going on. And so I wanted to show you what happened because this morning, even though my media request was denied, I came here and so did a number of the victims that wanted to talk about the impact of family court. And they first denied my media request. They said the hearing was set in Department 106 in this courthouse. And they denied my request. They tried to deter the victims' families and everybody coming that would have told the truth because the prosecutor had created a witness that they couldn't have be not credible. She's asking for money, restitution, for the mental stress that this put on her. And then they told all the victims and the public that the hearing was not in this courthouse this morning, that it had been moved. So they drove all the way back up to San Jose, only to find out they had been tricked, that the hearing already was taking place in this courthouse in a different courtroom, meaning the judge that had denied my media request and our right to show what had gone on in that hearing was not the judge who issued sentencing. And so when everybody drove back here to try to hear what was happening, the hearing was already over. And that is how the district attorney creates victims, keeps the flow of money coming, and the connection to family court is super important because family court is a revenue source for the court system, and prosecutors and the criminal system are an expense. And so they protect the revenue, which is the divorce attorneys who get privately paid to bring these domestic violence cases. They protect the therapists. They keep the children away. They protect this bogus reunification thing that doesn't work. And so if I could tell all of you one message, just as you have learned from all the cop watchers to stay out of, to not talk to police, you've got to stay out of family court. When you're fighting with your former spouse, you have to stay out of court. You think you didn't get married and the government won't have any say in your life? Well, if you've ever had children with somebody, the government has permission to come in and start deciding what is going to happen to your children. They decide what activities they're going to go to. They decide what school they're going to go to. They decide when you're going to see your kid for a dinner visit. So get along with the people you have children with, stay out of court, and don't end up in this mess. Because nobody ever wins when they represent themselves in court, and that's 90% of people that go through family court involuntarily without an attorney. So I am live streaming this because I have been reporting on this. It will take me hours to write this up, which I do write up articles, but I want everyone to understand how this works. It is the nonprofits that are bogus and that are making things up so that they can keep getting money. Women SV, that is a nonprofit that I talked about last night, and I'm going to do a video on pretty soon. That's a nonprofit that is the ground zero for divorce referrals for high asset divorce cases in Santa Clara County. And two of the lawyers that they referred that are involved in this case were BJ Fathom and Nicole Ford. So they're referring attorneys that are creating this hot mess in family court and then resulting in putting people in criminal court because they have mental health issues and other issues. We will not solve issues in family court related to mental health and related to public safety issues. And so it's very important for everybody to see that. It's important when you have a fight with whoever you're married to or had children with, stay out of court. The government doesn't need to be involved in that. And the district attorneys and the public defenders and the divorce attorneys are not going to do the job that we pay them to do. So I'm going to hang out here for a little bit. I'm going to try to read your comments. We're going to catch the attorneys that are coming out of the courthouse now right before lunch. And we are going to continue to remind everybody what's really going on in family court, because the courts are working overtime to hide these dockets and to keep family court out of the public eye. We're not allowed to have cameras in these courtrooms. We're not even allowed to have cameras in these courthouses to show you how they're hiding all these dockets. So I want everybody to spread that message. My videos will always be aimed at teaching everybody how to stay out of court. And please remember that when the government gets involved in anything, they will always behave badly. That means government court-appointed attorneys for children. That means court-appointed attorneys if you're in a criminal case and you can't afford your own lawyer. And it certainly means the prosecutors, who make more money than judges. We have underpaid our judges, and I know that's shocking for everybody to hear. But in Santa Clara County, we pay judges $200,000 a year, whereas we pay sheriff deputies and prosecutors up to $500,000. Okay, I'm going to read your comments now. I'm going to try to scroll back through those. And because I wasn't watching, I was just recording and ranting about that story because I've been covering that case for almost 2 years. And so there are 106 people watching. Yeah, John Danicola, you just said, but they didn't mind taking our tax money to rebuild these courthouses. That's right. There's the family courthouse in Santa Clara County that cost $263 million. It has a state-of-the-art security and camera system, but we're not allowed to record in there. Only they're allowed to record. And we have to keep asking ourselves, why, if the public is paying for these cameras and these systems, and we have set everything up to operate during the middle of the pandemic, why are we not allowed to record in these courthouses? What are they hiding in there that they don't want the public to see? Because what they're hiding is so strong, they were able to put a man in jail for 2 years so that he wouldn't tell his family court story to a jury. Because when somebody tells a jury a story about what happens to them in family court, those jurors go home and they tell their fellow employees, they tell their neighbors, they tell their friends, and then people start finding out what's going on in our family courthouses. The family courthouses that cost $263 million to build. And that's just here. San Diego, just as bad. Orange County, just as bad. So I'm going to read more of your comments. It's the type of people, this is Kellis, it's the type of people who want to get involved in government that are the problem. I think that is a very good statement. I'm going to tell you why. Because it used to be back in the day that working for the government was seen as not very idealistic. And then government got bigger and bigger, and we gave them immunity. Everybody has immunity these days, except for those of us who are out here doing things on a private level or whatever. A city employee has immunity, a mayor has immunity, city council people have immunity, police officers have immunity. Everybody has immunity. And in family court, these therapists, you're allowed to lie in court. So that's why if you hire an attorney and they tell a big lie or a bigger story as if they're a prosecutor, if they do that, then they have immunity. It's called litigation privilege. And so we have all this immunity. We have all of our government people working for unions, and they have binding arbitration clauses, which means they go to businesses like Jams and Signature Resolutions for arbitration if ever they have an employment dispute, and they're not going to win, and they're not going to be able to talk about it. And so we have all of that going on, and we have no media, no meaningful media covering our local government and our courts anymore. And so that's a huge problem as well. Okay, thank you very much for the comment for Wayne Park. Appreciate it. We work really hard. Someone's asking a question. Does it mean that anything about the yellow fringe on the flag? Okay, I'm going to tell you guys something. You guys, a lot of people make comments about the fringe on the flag and the oath of the judges and everything else. People who say that are immediately classified by the government as sovereign citizens. And we have so many issues of laws being broken by public officials, statute of limitations going out. We don't need to worry about that. We don't need to worry about what flag they're flying or not flying. And I know the debates are ridiculous. But when we deviate and we start talking about flags, oaths, gender, somebody's lying in court, we miss the more important issues. And I really want to encourage all of you to look at how your government is operating and how it's spending the money and focus on those issues and not on what a flag looks like and the fringe. I mean, you guys have had me looking at that and listening to that for a long time. And we're dealing with so many more important issues that if we get caught on those kind of topics, we miss the other lessons that we should be getting out of these courthouses and these legal proceedings. And the most important lesson of all is it used to be that people involved in a divorce case got divorced in about 6 months. Most of the time, they didn't even have an attorney, couldn't afford an attorney. That was the 60s and 70s. Then we did the Welfare Reform Act. Then we started sending money to the courthouses. Then we added the Violence Against Women Act. All of these things cost taxpayers so much money. And we're getting that money and we're feeding this system that we know that is broken. So please don't focus on it being a gender issue, on it being an issue of a judge violating their oath. They're violating their oath every single day when they don't follow the law. And so let's focus on that, and let's focus on explaining to people and educating people how our government is working when it comes to our family court systems. Because not only are our family court systems all about divorce and custody, but then they get you in probate court, because that is all about all the real estate. So be sure that you don't get stuck on those smaller issues, but pay attention to what we're trying to show you on these kinds of things. Okay, I'm going to read more comments. David's and, I don't know what that means. Oh, sorry, I'm going to hold this up. Can they manipulate the videos? Absolutely. Whoever asked that. John Danicola. First of all, they don't usually give you videos of the securities and of the family law proceedings. And if you record them yourself, they threaten you with a misdemeanor charge. But when the government is the one we can edit our videos. The only videos I can't edit are my live stream videos. And so it's why when I want to tell you something that I'm working on that I don't have time to write up, I do it and kind of as my notes to make sure that you guys can all see what I'm talking about. And then we can go back to it and listen to it later and hopefully use it to educate people as we do more videos and more reporting. But if the government's in charge of videos, just like police being in charge of body cams, you bet your sweet bippy they can manipulate the videos. So that was John Denicola. We can't have, this is Bacher Bob. We can't have mentally ill attorneys and therapists providing services for children. Valerie Howton should be disbarred. Okay. I don't know who that is, but whoever just said something about Valerie Howton, I'm going to talk about Valerie Howton. So Valerie Howton was an attorney who decided to also become a marriage and family therapist, one of those therapists like Marcia Clark. And back in the 80s and 90s, she worked for a large law firm known as Hope Fenton, and she was kind of thick with Jim Towery. How thick, I can't say. I don't have information on that. I do know that Towery got divorced 2 times. He went to work for the bar, and the attorneys that he seemed to be associated with kind of got special protection. And Towery is the one in my live stream video. He's been involved in my personal divorce, but also all of the worst divorce cases that I have covered. And he retired shortly after we exposed the Bar Bench Media Police Committee. But Valerie Howton is an attorney who was involved in a real estate scam. And what she did was she went and worked with some other attorneys, Liz Goodley and some others, and they started duping donors and high net worth investors to donate to this real estate scam. And then the real estate scam went broke. So there were people who lost millions of dollars investing in it. And Valerie Howton was criminally prosecuted by our district attorney. The case was before Judge Manukian, who is the judge in my video about the Enza court. His wife is the appellate court judge. And we were covering that case. Judge Manukian granted a media request in that case, which is very rare in Silicon Valley. And then during the pandemic, the district attorney that had charged the case in 2016 just up and dismissed it. And then there was a civil case, and the judges involved in that civil case had a number of conflicts. The Houghtons were represented by attorneys who were working on contract with the public defender's alternate defender's office, which is the IDO. And so Valerie and her husband had a private attorney, Chuck Smith, and an attorney from the alternate defender's office. And the last time I was in court, they dismissed the criminal charges against him because they always do let attorneys off what they don't seem to let non-attorneys off. So Jeff Rosen, our district attorney, just dismissed those charges. And in the dismissal, they announced that the husband had committed fraud in obtaining public defense through the IDO office. And when I asked for the records of that and how much he was going to be ordered to pay back, I was told that wasn't a matter of public record. So you want to tell me how an attorney gets that much protection? She dupes and steals millions of dollars from people. She gets out of the criminal charges. She has a judge who is buddies with Chuck Smith, her civil attorney, and they even goes out and commits fraud to have taxpayers pay for his attorneys. That's one of my videos of them in the elevator. And we don't get to know what fraud it was he committed or if they properly paid everything back. So as soon as that case was dismissed, there had been a lien and a stay on them being able to do anything about their house. They sold their house and they moved out of state where there's a homesteading agreement, which meant that any of the victims of their white-collar crimes would not be able to collect money. And that's how attorneys get out of criminal prosecution. Anybody else, non-attorney, who had done that would probably have been in prison or jail for a long time. So that's the comment on Valerie Howton. Oh, ghost buildings, ghost employees. Do employees exist? You know, who said that? Let's see who said that. What's normal? That's exactly what this feels like. We've spent a lot of money to build these courthouses. The dockets move around. The judges are either incompetent, complicit, or they're corrupt, because an incompetent judge doesn't know the law. A complicit judge knows that attorneys are involved in misconduct, like prosecutors and public defenders are in misconduct, and the judges are supposed to control the attorneys, and they don't control the attorneys. So that's how they're complicit. And then there's corruption. And when you say that word, everyone says it's a smear campaign or that you're crazy, and they try to gaslight you. But the bottom line is judges in Santa Clara County only make $200,000 a year. That is about what a Starbucks manager makes. And so when we underpay judges, we leave the temptation. It's like underpaying employees in a business that's making a lot of money. If Google only paid people minimum wage and didn't pay them a lot of money while you're hearing headlines of how much shareholders and CEOs are making, their employees become disgruntled. And so it's really important to notice that our judges are underpaid, and as a result, we get a lot of incompetent, complicit, and corrupt judges. Okay, I'm going to go back to some more questions. Can the people go on strike from the government? Yeah, it's called the First Amendment, and it's the right to seek redress and protesting and everything else. And somebody says, have you ever thought about teaming up with Bay Transparency? I will team up with anybody. Unlike a lot of the channels that you watch that are specifically watching cops, I do watch cops in connection to a culture of a community, and I'll be doing a video about that a little later this afternoon, related to Los Altos. If you remember, I went and did that video a while ago. And but other than that, I film police because I can't film courthouses, and it is my mission to make sure that we fight for cameras in these courtrooms and transparency and accountability on government attorneys and judges. So if Bay Area Transparency wants to join me, or anybody else, I think that's great. More comments on the flag. I'm not going to answer that. I'm not going to talk about it. Valerie Howton needs psychological help that doesn't exist yet, but she is still allowed to make decisions on other people's children. Oh, what I forgot to add about Valerie Howton is, while she was being criminally prosecuted and out on OR, on bail for years, she was court appointed to be an attorney for somebody's children. So now picture that. Your children's attorney is being criminally prosecuted for duping elder donors in a real estate fraud case, and you aren't following the law. Now, think about this, because I listened to this all morning. Think about if any member of the public is arrested and allowed to be out on bail. If they violate any law, into jail they go. So when I was prosecuted for 6 years for recording a cop in the court file room, I didn't jaywalk. I didn't do anything because I knew they would put me in jail if they could. And Valerie Howton was allowed to break laws as a children's attorney, and she actually said, oh, I told the children I represent that I'm being criminally prosecuted, and they're fine with that. So you mean to tell me that the judge, and I think that judge was Judge McCracken, she couldn't find another attorney not being criminally prosecuted to represent children, but then she does the rote recital of, it's fine, this is in the best interest of children to have an attorney. The children's parents weren't being criminally prosecuted, but their attorney was, and a judge said that was in their best interest. So I am kind of running out of the comments. I appreciate all your support. and all your positive comments. It is a lot of work, and it is exhausting. The person who asked if this is the same Marsha Clark from the O.J. Simpson trial, no, this is worse. This is a reunification therapist. She doesn't really have any qualifications other than that, and that is that Marsha Clark. And I have a video up about it. Oh yeah, Valerie Howton then prosecuted. That's the other thing. It's called Darvo, where what they do is when someone speaks up or is really, society would consider them the victim, they snap that person up and put them through the system, almost like to teach them a lesson to not speak up again. And every time someone makes a false allegation, especially about domestic violence or anything else, it sets real victims back just forever. And so, hi, Johnny Bravo. Nice to see you in here. They sealed it. Yes, they sealed this. They sealed the court. And what they did was, it was a public hearing about a man who had taken a gun to a therapist's office in connection with his family law case. And the media, the mainstream media that the judges sit in those clubs with, didn't report on it. And then they moved the docket around so that the public and the people affected by the case could not attend the hearing. And that's effectively sealing it up. So, yeah, I don't feel bad for a billionaire with a scratch on his yacht either, but so somebody asked, can a county councilman or state or federal congressman inquire about this practice? They must be accountable to somebody. That's probably my favorite question. In fact, I'm going to pin that. Can I pin it? Yeah, I pinned you. I just pinned you. The reason that question is important is there are lots of people in county government, city government, state government, and the feds that could do something about this anytime they wanted to. So when we started reporting on Women SV, we came up with all the documents, everything, the witnesses. When you're doing investigative reporting and you're writing an article, you have to be so careful to not commit defamation. You have to have your facts super clear. So when I'm talking on these videos, I'm talking about what I remember from the case, what I've seen, what I experienced as a reporter, but also just as a local resident. And any of these mayors could come in when they see certain cases. Mayors, city attorneys can prosecute cases just like the district attorney can, but we find too often that they don't. So, yes, they could, and we're going to talk about that in my video, because last night I was attending a public meeting in Los Altos, California, where we had worked on this nonprofit that's referring all these divorce attorneys, including BJ Fathom and Nicole Ford and Yana Sokodra and Jim Hoover, and all the attorneys that are in these worst cases. Julia McDowell, who was the attorney for this father involved in this case, all getting referrals, sitting on that nonprofit's board. And so when our reporting came out, the city council people went to the founder of the nonprofit and her board, and they asked about it. They conducted their own investigation and said, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong. And they are friends with these people. They sit in the community with them. They've convinced themselves that giving them money is the right thing to do, so they give them public money, and then they let them off the hook even when the evidence is pretty strong. There was an attorney mayor, his name's Jonathan Weinberg, and he was in the meeting last night, and he said, oh, I did an investigation and everything's just anecdotal. I know that law enforcement took the investigation up and they found nothing, so it's concerning. Almost as if the allegations had been false. And first of all, Mr. Weinberg shouldn't have known about anything related to law enforcement, because complaints are supposed to be confidential, as is the investigative process. And if it closes without prosecution, nobody ever even knows that it happened. And so my first question to Mr. Weinberg is going to be how he knew about law enforcement investigations related to a nonprofit that he had funded and supported. But yeah, these guys can do a lot of stuff, and they just don't do it. So anyway, I just wanted to get all that out today. I think at the bottom, someone said zoom out, I'm zooming out. at the end of the day, I hope that all of you will pay attention, that my videos are intended to teach you messages, mostly about how the courts really operate. People are not following the law. There's not a lot of due process going on, and that happens from our prosecutors and our public defenders. And I want to give a shout out to the dirty prosecutor, Olivia Mendoza, who was on this case, and the public defender. The public defender is Allison Gomez on this case involving Jeff at this courthouse. And Allison Gomez specifically worked to deter members of the public and people from coming to these hearings. And I think that was a misuse of her power. Any attorney that works in the name of public defense needs to defend the public right to know and needs to make sure that due process is assured, not just to the people who are charged with the crime, but for the crime victims who are impacted by the crime. And I think those two government attorneys in this, they were really bad. And who is the person in charge of addressing that? The city attorney, the county attorney, and of course the district attorney, who knows exactly what's going on. So we have a police officer coming down here. Let's see if he's coming to talk to us, because we usually get, no. So don't forget that police officers, that's a San Jose police officer who was probably a witness in a case here today. The sheriff's department is in charge. They make a lot of money contracting with courts to provide security. So that is the answer to that question about who can prosecute. Allison Gomez threw my kids under the bus. I don't know who Bob is, but Allison Gomez is a public defender, and so far I have not been very impressed. I've seen some really good public defenders and some really good prosecutors, but they were not in Santa Clara County. Okay, thanks you guys. Oh, and to the tribe, seems to be working perfectly for judges and lawyers. You bet. They made the system, they make the rules, and it's working just the way they want it to work. So thanks everybody who came in to watch for a little bit just now. That was 47 minutes. I know that was a long time. I had to kind of get my thoughts out about this hearing because they hid this docket, they locked the public out, and the person who said they effectively sealed the case, that's exactly right. So I'll have another video up soon. Thanks again, everybody, for your support.